Alright guys, so we're checking out two new FPV monitors here from Hawkeye. So Hawkeye, they've made a bunch of FPV monitors for a number of years now, and so now they have a couple of these kind of smaller ones. No DVRs in either one of these, unlike some of the past ones you've seen from Hawkeye. So we have the Little Master on the left here, which is a 2.5-inch screen, and the XITU Edition on the right here is a 3.5-inch screen. They're both about the same brightness. I think it's 350 lux. The one on the left, the 2.5-inch, has like a matte screen, so it's not as reflective, sort of a matte shiny finish. But the 3.5 screen has a shiny glossy finish. So I'm not a big fan of the shiny glossy screens. I would prefer the matte screens. They've previously used matte screens on all their monitors. So this is the first one I've seen from Hawkeye that has a shiny reflective screen. So the basically the monitors here are have built-in receivers. So there's a 5.8 gigahertz FPV receiver built into each of these. I think they're both 48 channels, and they both operate the same way via these three buttons here on the left. And they both have internal batteries that are charged via micro USB. No micro USB cables included in the kit or power brick. You need to supply that for yourself to charge up the screens. They do come with these little 3.5mm audio jacks for the side port here. This is for AV in and out. So in the default config is for AV out. So whatever signal you get here on the screen, depending on what channel you're tuned into, that video signal will get pumped out through this jack here, and then you can plug this into either a DVR or some other goggle, something like that. If you may use, I could say like the DJI goggles here, for example. This is something that I showed off in an Instagram posting. Looks like with the screen here on the side, and then I plugged in the other side of the jack here into the AV in port on the goggle, and so whatever analog feed I was getting here on the screen via this receiver was getting sent to the goggles, and I could see it on the screen here. So you do have to go into the AV in mode to see the analog signal from the monitor, but people on the outside, obviously you'll be able to see what's on the screen here, but they can also see what's on the screen as well, obviously because there's a screen right here. But in terms of latency, I was able to fly through this setup no problem. I didn't really notice any latency, and this is basically like any other analog in setup that you would have for the DJI goggles. I know you can do some pretty sophisticated setups with, like, you know, dual diversity receivers, rapid fire, and all that. Those also have some complications in terms of like providing power to the receiver, all that kind of stuff. Obviously no screen here. Now, because this has a built-in battery, you just power it up. The signal gets received and seen on the screen and then sent out over here, and then plugged into the AV in on the DJI goggles. You can see the analog signal, and I would think that something like this is going to be useful for people that don't want to spend the money on a full analog setup and just want, like, maybe just some simple cases where they're not going to be using it often, maybe flying whoops indoors, for example. This could be a pretty easy setup just to get some quick analog video. Maybe you want to watch some other pilots, for example. You could do that on your DJI goggles that way. This wouldn't be the best receiver setup because it's just a single receiver and it doesn't come with the greatest antenna. It's just a simple whip antenna here. It is a SMA antenna, as you can see here. On the Banggood website, it's listed as RPSMA, but these are definitely both SMA. Now, in my setup, I use this TrueRC Singularity SMA antenna, and this is how I got my signal. It's okay. I mean, again, you're dealing with just one single receiver, not a diversity setup, and it's just not even the best receiver in the world. But in a pinch, if you want to get some analog video into DJI goggles, this is not a bad way to go, and it's not too expensive either. I think it's like less than $40 for this screen, and it also includes this cable as well. Obviously, if you want better video, if you're going to be using the DJI goggles for more long-term analog video, then you probably want something a little bit better. Maybe a dedicated setup with a dual diversity receiver like rapid fire, etc. But then you're talking about a cost of, maybe close to $200, because you have to get the receiver, you get the antennas, plus the adapters and all the power setup and all that kind of stuff for your goggles. Now, if you just want to just record your video here, so say for example you want to use this and record someone else that has analog video and record them, just take this plug here and plug it into, like, say, a PowerPlay DVR. So I've done a review video on that one as well. I'll link that down in the description. Just pick that one up, plug this into the AV in, and then you'll see the video on that screen, and you can record the video from this setup here on the PowerPlay DVR. Additionally, if you have this plugged into your DJI goggles, the DVR on the DJI goggles will record the analog video when you're in the AV in mode from this here. So that's how you're going to be seeing the video from this monitor. It's actually recorded on the DJI DVR at 60 FPS. So it's a pretty nice setup, pretty good frame rate, and decent resolution and bitrate. So for you're basically seeing like the best of the best of the possible video recordings for this receiver that's built into this monitor. So just a quick little size comparison here. Obviously 2.5 inch versus 3.5 inch. Here is the Eachine DVR watch. It's the 2-inch screen, so it's a little bit smaller. This one does come with a DVR as well built in, but no ability to change the antenna. Again, I have a video in this one as well if you want to check it out. I'll link that down in the description. But just for size comparison, you can see that similar in size, a little bit thicker. But it is only half an inch difference in terms of the screen. Alright, so to get this going up and running here, long press the power button to turn it on. There's a plus and a minus button to change settings and also change band and channel. We'll go ahead and show you that here in a second. So power this up. A little logo, little pilot, and you get an OSD here. So we have battery voltage at the top there, as well as your channel and frequency that you're tuned into, as well as the RSSI right there. It says it's 11% because there's no signal right now. Go ahead and I'll plug in the Tino up here. Okay, so here's a look at the screen itself, and it's a decent screen. It's not super bright, but colors and the resolution and everything is acceptable. I never really flew directly through the screen itself. I kind of find it too difficult to fly myself through these screens. I think this is more for watching other people fly, and this is totally fine for that. So to bring up the menu, you're going to short press the power button, and then to go through each of the menu items here, you just short press the power button, and you can see what's available to you. You can adjust the brightness, contrast, saturation. I didn't play with any of those. You can adjust those settings to your preference if you want. Obviously, format is going to be PAL or NTSC. I would leave it on auto so you can switch between different cameras. And if you want to turn off your OSD here, just click one of the plus or minus buttons here to turn the OSD on or off. And it doesn't really bother me too much because it's pretty small, so I just leave it on. You can see what it looks like when it's off. Turn that back on. Sleep is how many minutes it's going to be on before it actually powers itself off, and I just leave that off. If you have this off and you forget to turn it off, it obviously will basically run the battery down all the way. I did notice that on this voltage reading on the OSD, when it's fully charged, it's just a little bit over 4 volts, and at about 3.5 volts, the voltage will turn red to indicate that it's running low on voltage, and about 3.3 to 3.4 volts, the monitor will go into like a low power mode. It'll basically say it doesn't have enough battery and it will turn off. I found that the total power on time is about 2 hours for the 2.5 inch and about 2.5 hours on the 3.5 inch. Now to change your bands and channels, you're just going to press the plus and minus buttons here like this. So you press that, it changes to F1, A1, B1, etc. So we'll go back to R here, and then the bottom button will change the channel number. So R4, R5, R6, etc. So that's how you can go through all of the bands and channels. To do an auto search, you long press the plus button. Auto scan. I don't generally trust this particular method. It doesn't really work all that well on a lot of these auto search functions on these receivers. But it looks like it found, at least this time it found the right one, R1. That's the actual frequency the video transmitter is on. And then if you long press the minus button, it'll switch this AV in out port from AV out to AV in. So if we'll go ahead and do that. Let's long press this. So it goes to AV2 here. So then if you have another video source, you plug that into this side here, and then that will send the video to the screen. So instead of receiving your video from the receiver, you're receiving it from this video source, whatever you're plugging this into. So if you have another receiver, for example, maybe like a dual diversity receiver with AV out, then you can pump that into the screen and use that as the screen to view the other receiver, not the one that's built in. And then to switch back to the receiver, you just long press the minus button, and I'll go back to the built-in receiver. I'll go ahead and turn on the 3.5-inch version here. You see this one has a different OSD elements. You got your voltage, channel, RSSI. This power on time is here. Looks like it's seconds and then tenths of a second or hundreds of a second. And looks like we're at A2. Let's go ahead and switch this to R1. And you can see on both of these, they're both 4:3 aspect ratio. So this is going to look best on cameras that are set to 4:3 mode. Now in the 3.5-inch version, there's a slot here for micro SD card, but I think it's for a future feature that's not in this one currently. It's for DVR, and that is something that they're developing, but it's not in this particular version. So they actually made the mold for this that has this slot for a micro SD card, but don't put a micro SD card in there because there's nothing to hold it or prevent it from slipping in, and then it'll just rattle around inside because there's no actual slot there for a micro SD card. And then you'll have to open up the whole case here to get the micro SD card out because there's no DVR in there. But later on, when there is a DVR, this button here will be for starting and stopping recording the DVR once they add that feature. But currently, it's not in there. Also, I almost forgot, there's a little M2 screw nut thing here on the bottom of these. That's for probably mounting to like a transmitter or something like that. There is no mount included with these, so you'll probably have to create some sort of 3D printed mount or something. Someone will probably create something for this to mount them to transmitters. That's what people will probably typically use something like this for. And then kind of compare the viewing angles of the two monitors here. You can see the I guess this is the horizontal viewing angle of the 3.5 inch is pretty decent vertically, or I guess horizontally, but vertically you can see it turns very dark as you rotate. So with vertical field of view is not so great on the 3.5 inch, and then on the 2.5 inch here, it's pretty decent horizontally. Vertically, you can see as it turns kind of dark. So again, the vertical field of view is a little bit limited as well on the 2.5 inch. All right, so I think that's going to do it for these two guys. I really like this one for using it on my DJI goggles if I want to use some analog video, because I don't have a full dual diversity receiver setup, but I do like the fact that I can get analog video and then record it on these goggles here using the DVR. So that's kind of a cool setup. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.